All right, Dax, another offseason is upon us. What's the toughest part about being a journeyman in a new city?
Well, Gordo, you know this as well as I do. Being a journeyman in a new city or a city that you're staying in is always difficult. The uncertainty of the future. Are you going to stay? Are you going to go somewhere else? Back in 2020 with Nashville SC, when we had a brand new team, everyone coming to a new city, there was only one person that we trusted to get our real estate needs done, and that's Erin Mishu with Fikes Realty Group. She made everything perfect, flawless, seamless. We had absolutely no issues getting into our house here in Nashville, and all my teammates felt the same way. You can check Erin out at majorleague-realestate.com.
Major League Journeymen back in the house. It's a snowy ice day here in St. Louis, so we're reporting live from the humble Gargan abode here in St. Louis, Missouri. I got Alan Gordon, our legendary icon, self-appointed stud to my right, and I have the newest minted Georgia peach, Dax McCarty. I don't know when that's going to get old. I like it. I like the peach, and it works well with your hair. You kind of look like a fuzzy peach a little bit. You got all these things working in your favor.
Peaches are one of the most
days been?
Peaches are one of the most delicious underrated fruits, so I'll take that.
When they are ripe, they're also awful if they're not ripe.
So like me, when I'm playing great, I'm awesome. When I stink, I'm horrible. So that's perfect.
Works out perfect.
Dude, preseason's been great, man. I felt like, I don't know if I mentioned this on one of the previous pods, but I felt like a little kid in a candy store again, man. I felt like a rookie again, honestly. I had that I think when you're at a place for a long time, and as you know, as a journeyman, 4 years is a long time for me, being in Nashville, you get used to the routine, right? Especially when you're with the same coach, you get used to the preseasons, you get used to the training, you get used to the cadence and the rhythm of how it's going to be, right? And so when you lose that and you're going to a new environment, especially, one that you're not really sure how it looks, man, it's exciting. And I got down there, we did all the medicals, all the physicals, just everything's different, man. The dynamic of the locker room is different, right? There's more, I think there's more foreign guys, right? And then there's tons of young guys. I love that Atlanta. I mean, they have a little bit more built out academy, I think, than a bunch of other teams in MLS. And the academy kids are there getting their medicals and their physicals. And I'm introducing myself and I'm trying to remember all these names. And I'm halfway through it, I'm like, guys, I got to be honest. I'm not going to remember any of your names right now, but I promise you I will learn them as we go through preseason. Don't hate me. And I'll give you guys one quick little funny anecdote from one of the young kids, right? We're having a chat and somehow we're at the table, right, eating breakfast. It's one of the training sessions. And it somehow got brought up that he was a 2007 or something like that. And I'm like, come on, man. I'm born in 1987, dude. This is crazy,
Jeez.
right? And he starts laughing and he's like, oh man, you're 2 years older than my dad. And I'm like, look, I'm going to let that slide, but keep that to yourself next time. All right. It's been great, man. Dude, Gordo, this preseason, you would thrive, buddy. I mean, full credit to the coaching staff and Pineda. They've introduced us back slowly. They haven't killed us right away. A lot of stuff with the ball, a lot of small-sided games, a lot of small-sided possession, a lot of stuff to small goals. And the best part is usually every warm-up includes some type of rondo, some type of 5v2. Buddy, I'm smiling ear to ear every time we go out there. It's like 14 degrees outside right now. I think the cold front is hitting the entire US. And I got to tell you, man, it's just been a fun 2 weeks, dude, getting to know everybody, trying to just, get reintroduced and acclimated into a new locker room. It's fun, man. It's been a good time so far.
I'm glad. So what I'm hearing you say is that I was completely right the last episode we did. And I told you this was coming. I said, dude, you'll never feel this. You'll never feel this again, dude.
You did. Oh, buddy.
I remember those feelings, man. You're absolutely right. Going into new teammates, everything's fresh, man.
And I gotta say, I got to say, Gargs, I don't know how much you were at the Atlanta United training ground when you were covering the team, but man,
what a place, huh?
Beautiful setup. But I tell you
Yes.
what, their coffee setup is incredible. They got about four different espresso and latte machines scattered throughout the place. Everywhere I turn, if I'm going into video, there's a coffee. I'm like, why not? Boom, hit the button and it just pours right out, right? If you're upstairs getting a meal, a little coffee, why not? Sure, no problem.
Are you at the point in your career where you have coffees while you're playing 5v2?
I'm not as good as you. I'm not as good as you were back then, right? And for you, I know for you, 5v2, it was a necessity for you to be great because when you got in the middle, you couldn't move. Your back would just kill you, and you would never win the ball back. For me, I'm not at that point yet, so I still get after it when I have to go in the middle. But I've already introduced a few of my new teammates to it's a very prestigious Dax McCarty Meg club. Two of them have already been introduced, and so I'm excited about that. That club is just going to keep growing throughout the year, especially with how much we do rondos. Oh, it's going to get big.
Do you just are you keeping scalps inside your locker, or how are you keeping?
I go about it really quietly. You know, I let other people kind of
just put it on public blast on the podcast, right?
Yeah, I didn't name any names. I'm not naming names. They know who they are.
There's name a better feeling than begging somebody.
It's the best.
Gordo. Every time you see like a video from the subs that are doing the warm up and doing 5v2 on the field, and you get the Meg, and everyone just loses their shit and starts dancing around.
Gordo,
like it's the second best feeling behind scoring a goal. It's pure euphoria.
Gordo, you'll remember this. In Germany, before we did the Schweini testimonial game, we had a rondo going, and I still have the video on my phone. I'm gonna send it to Statman Jack, and I'm gonna see if he can upload it for this. When I megged Marko Mitrovic, the assistant coach, it was the best feeling, and everyone was celebrating. And you just zoom in on a different guy each time, and the face that they make or the celebration. It's I can watch that video for like 30 minutes, dude. It's awesome.
I think you sent it to me not too long ago, and the only part about it, like that, the ball was pinging. It was like bang, 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 bang. I don't think I touched it once, and then you
didn't,
and I didn't need to. We all go crazy. It was so good, so good.
When you get that thing popping around, even like you know the self-imposed Meg on the outside, when you're just skipping from corner to corner, and you're just standing in the middle, you still count it. It's so good.
It's the best.
Boys,
I'm living every day, man. I'm enjoying every day.
You look happy, man.
I'm happy, bro. I'm happy. It's been a good start. I think this week, today's our day off. This coming week, we're really going to ramp things up. We have our first preseason game coming up on Saturday against Birmingham Legion. So I'm excited to see what it looks like in a game.
All right, well. I come on this Monday a little bit happy as well, boys. A little bit refreshed. So I went out to Salt Lake, followed my oldest child out there to watch him walk around a soccer field for a couple days, and but I was reunited with a couple old legends, couple Salt Lake legends, Kyle Beckerman,
friend of the pod.
Yeah, friend of the pod, Pablo Mascheroni, also a friend of the pod,
yes.
And then Nick Raimondo.
Wow,
so, what a group!
What a crew!
We all sat together and told old stories till late in the to the wee hours of the night. It was phenomenal.
What
man.
A group!
Seeing some old guys, dude, talking about different war stories
you do look happy. I see that little smile on your face. I'm disappointed the mustache hasn't gotten longer. It seems like
I was going to say I think it's actually coming in
a little bit. I'm disappointed.
Yeah, it's
a maintenance kind of thing, isn't it, Gordo?
It's a weekly thing. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be strategic about these things.
I disagree. Grow it out, dude. You'd be so much more interesting. Come on.
Well, speaking of changing scenery, I think this is a good segue because we're going to start with the annual age-old tradition of Major League Soccer coaches carousel. And we had a number that have moved zip codes, some within the league, some new entrants, assistants to heads. We had a lot, and we're not going to be able to go through all of them because there's a lot here. And I think that some of these storylines will play out over the course of the season. But I did want to touch on a couple of them. I'm going to run through them, and I would like to hear just you guys pick out one that really kind of stands out for you. Good, negative, indifferent, whatever that is, but whatever you guys want to touch on, I want to hear it from your perspective. So I'm going to run through the list. We got Montreal, Laurent Courtois. Charlotte brought in Dean Smith. You know what? I'm also going to give you the dates too, because I think that they're significant as well. Laurent was named, I think he actually might have been the most recent, January 8th. Charlotte brought in Dean Smith beginning of December 12th. Troy Lesesne, January 10th. That's right. That did just get announced. There was rumblings about it for a while, but it wasn't official. Troy Lesesne moves from New York to DC. Minnesota, we still don't have a coach. So I guess they're the latest. They were flirting.
It's the interim to the interim.
I was gonna say they were floating with your boy Cameron Knowles, Gordo, and he heard your comments and said, "I am taking my talents out of here and straight to the USL." So he's out. Minnesota's still looking for a coach.
I'll be a fan of his forever. We should
get him some pod gear if we ever make it.
Just a point of clarification, Gargs. I'm pretty sure Cameron Knowles is the guy in right now, right? It was someone else that
he's the interim. Yeah, you're right.
Cameron Knowles is. Yeah.
But they haven't named official, I guess.
Right.
The New England, they have Caleb Porter. So almost a very New England move in getting a trusted name and bringing him in. I would see some pretty significant success there. Steady. You got Chris Armas into Colorado. We'll touch on Colorado a little bit later in the pod. Phil Neville moves from Miami to Portland. Toronto FC bringing in John Herdman. Inter Miami, we're still counting this Tata Martino, so he'll have a full season in charge in Miami. Frank Klopas takes the full reins December 5th, so he's had some time to work. New York Red Bulls, Sandro Schwartz on my birthday, December 14th. And that completes the list. So, Dax, does anybody jump out? Does anybody jump out to you first and foremost?
The situation that jumps out the most to me, first and foremost, is one of my old teams at Red Bull. So, and the reason I say that, I'm intrigued by the hire, because I'll say that because I don't know anything about Sandro Schwartz. I don't know where he's been. I know he was coaching in Europe, and I'm pretty sure he was in the Red Bull coaching tree in one of their clubs. I'm not exactly sure where.
He was at Bundesliga sides Mainz and Hertha Berlin.
Okay.
And then he was also in the Russian Premier League at Dynamo Moscow.
The reason it's interesting to me is because Red Bull they went this direction a couple years ago with Gerhard Struber. And it was inconsistent, and I would say for the most part, if you talk to people around the organization or if you ask the fans, I think a lot of people would say it wasn't successful. And so I think Red Bull very clearly, after Jesse Marsch, Chris Armas, they very clearly decided that the direction they want to go is a European coach who they have history with, or who they know. Maybe they've coached in the Bundesliga, maybe the Austrian Bundesliga, maybe at Red Bull Salzburg, one of their sister clubs. And it hasn't been successful. It hasn't worked out. And Troy Lesesne, who just went down to Red Bull, one of Red Bull's biggest rivals at DC United, actually took over a team in turmoil in the middle of last year, led them to the playoffs. And you had players coming out publicly backing this guy, saying, we want Troy Lesesne back. And they still decided that it wasn't for them. They said, we're going to move on, and we're going to go and get our own guy, right? That fits the mold of another Gerhard Struber. So to me, that's really intriguing, because I think it puts a lot of pressure right away on Schwartz to get it right from the beginning. And I don't know how many more times we have to see that, yes, there's no one size fits all answer for coaching in MLS. I just think if you have very minimal experience in MLS, you need a good group around you, right? And so I don't really know who his assistants are, but at the end of the day, I think this is going to be a big test for him to come over here, especially after Struber wasn't successful, and see if this method and this way of hiring coaches that Red Bull has decided, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think we can agree that Troy Lesesne, he kind of saved Red Bull. They've made the playoffs now 13, 14, 15 years in a row, but last year I think they got pretty fortunate to make it. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out for them. It's an interesting hire for me.
It is an interesting hire. the one the one nugget that I took out of what you were saying right there, though, and I would like to expand a little bit further because I think is an interesting piece, because I've been in this situation. I think you guys have been in this situation in terms of stumping for your current interim, right? So I was in this position a couple different times where you have a coach that you're saying, okay, yeah, let's go out publicly and say, like, this is our guy. People, the media is asking you. Do you feel like that is an accurate portrayal of what the players really want? Or do you think it is really just them kind of saving their bacon or putting themselves in a situation where, you're doing what's right by the guy that's currently in the office, and you may have a decent enough relationship to be in a good situation yourself, but you may not necessarily agree with that?
I think it's a little bit of both, really. I do. And I think it's different for every player, because if interim coach comes in and he might like one guy over another guy and he starts playing that guy more, well, the guy that's on the bench is not going to be too happy, right? He might not come out and publicly back the coach, but then the guy who's playing a lot is, right? But in general, so we played Red Bull the last game of the season last year in Nashville, where they beat us 1-0 on a penalty kick in the 90th minute or whatever it was, and that actually qualified them for the playoffs. Okay. And I still had a few buddies on the team, and the whispers around from the guys was that Lesane was universally loved in that locker room. Like a lot of the guys, it wasn't like, oh, it's only a few guys here and there. It was like, hey man, this is our guy. Like he took over our team when we were in turmoil, and he got everybody on the same page. He was a player's coach, right? And sometimes, like, forget about the X's and O's. Sometimes you just need a guy to come in and galvanize a squad. Give them a little confidence, crack a joke, right? Like just whatever, like get their mind off of how bad they've been playing. And Troy Lesane was able to do that. So I see what you're saying, Gargs, but I don't think that was the case in this scenario. I think the locker room genuinely liked him. But look, we're all professionals, right? Like if you have to move on from a coach, you have to move on from a coach. Like I'm sure they're going to buy into whatever, the new coach is saying. It's just for me, it's a very intriguing hire. And like I said, I'll be curious to see how he does and how quickly, if things start to not go so well, like how quickly, Red Bull will be interested in maybe making a change.
Gordo, you were in that position. I know I can come up with at least one situation because we were together. What do you feel about that? I know that you've obviously been a darling of the media, and they all ask your opinion. Do you feel like you were honest in those situations, or do you feel like you said what you needed to say?
What? I wasn't listening to your question. Well, your questions are so drawn out. There's like, so what do you want to know? Like,
I want to know,
he was 1,000% not paying attention to my answer. He just had his coach in his head that he was going to talk about. He didn't think you were going to go in this different direction.
Don't forget it. You can use a pen too, Gordo, if that'll help you. But anyway, the question was, are you answering the media's questions at the end of the year when you have an interim coach and they're asking you, hey, is he your guy that you want to stay and give him the full head coaching position? Or is it you just saying like, yeah, this is my guy because you know that your ass is safe and you're going to play because you helped him out and you helped him keep the job?
Yeah, I mean, for me in those situations, I was always going to be supportive of the interim coach. I was never in a position to be outspoken and be honest if I wanted to, because I was always playing for a position. And that's why we relied on guys like Landon and guys that were DPs and they were guaranteed, that could be a little bit more straightforward and honest. And guys, frankly, that could articulate it well. And Landon was one of those guys for us that could do that. And it's an unfair position sometimes for those guys, but that's when you need them to kind of step up and speak for the group, right? Because like I said, I was never, ever going to be in that position. And most of the time, the interim coach is the same. You already said it. They were giving me some sort of opportunity, and that's all I cared about. If I wasn't getting the opportunity, I just have to work harder. Right. I was never in that position. But I think it's really important to note. And, Dax has been in that position a bunch of times. He's the captain of a club and he's been asked tough questions. I've listened to his interviews where he's been asked tough questions. You have to straddle the fence, even if you're not sure about it.
It's a delicate balance. Yeah.
It's a very, very delicate balance, dude. And so you have to have an intelligent guy that is well spoken, that can kind of if you read through or in between the lines on what the guy is saying, you might be able to feel something, but nobody's going to come out and kill an interim coach and say, this is not our guy, we need somebody else. Aside from a very few people that are like, listen, I'm the boss, or I'm the player, I'm the guy here. I don't like these guys, like the guys in Toronto who came out and they were speaking against Bob Bradley. Very few players do that, right. But I think it is
also making more money than the coach and the
right,
GM combined,
exactly,
right?
Yeah, and so a lot of MLS players are not in that position, and that's why you have so much trouble with basketball, right? They're all making more than the coach. They don't mind. They don't care what they're saying. They're all guaranteed contracts. It's not really like that in the MLS. So I think it's a really, really tough situation.
So which coaching change stood out to you? Was that question simple enough?
That was great, Dan.
Yeah, what I'm going to go with kind of with Dax. Like, what intrigues me the most, I'm going to be watching Portland really, really carefully. I'm really intrigued by Neville, because the fans came out and said, we don't want this guy, and this is, and I have a personal relationship with Ned Grabavoy, and I think that for him, Ned's done a lot for this. If you don't know what Ned's been doing, he's been working to get himself in this position for 10 years or however long it's been. It's been 8. It's been a good chunk of change, and he's done a really good job behind the scenes. But now I think that these decisions, this is Ned stepping up to the big boy table.
Was this his first big decision as the GM of the Timbers?
I think this is his first hire, and then he just let Blanco go, so he's making some good decisions for the club, but they're bold. And now now you're on the line for your decisions, and so I'm going to be watching that one really, really closely, because as a coach or even a player, or we see it in the NFL all the time, like the first round quarterback gets drafted and these fans are like, they're booing him and he hasn't even played a snap for the, it's like they're not even giving this guy a chance. So he's going to have to really come out. He's going to have to be successful really early. And so there's just going to be this negative magnifying glass on this guy. So I'm just really intrigued by it. So that's the one that I'll be watching for sure.
What about you, Dan? Does anyone stand out to you?
I like a couple different things. I thought that Kurt Analfo's hire, Caleb Porter, was interesting. I think that, Kurt is now the sporting director or the GM or, whatever the title is. And I'm a big believer in that relationship as the most important relationship in the entire club. So if that's a guy that Kurt, and I don't know this for a fact or not, but they're contemporaries. They've been around the league for a long time. My guess is they've had some overlap in probably quite a few different places. And there's probably been some conversations throughout the years where they're somewhat aligned, and it made it easier for them to kind of take on the project, or Caleb to take on the project when he's sitting there talking with Kurt about the vision. And I think that ultimately a sporting director is there to serve the head coach. And if they're in lockstep, then you're going to find some pretty good success. You're going to get the players you want. And then ultimately it's, then it's on the locker room, it's on the team, et cetera. I think that was an interesting one. And the other one, which is probably more of a longer term play, is TFC. I think that they are still unraveling so much shit in their roster that it's going to take a little bit longer than they really wanted to. But I do think that Herdman was successful with the Canadian national team. He, I think, arguably got lesser talent to play well above what they were expected to do, at least at minimum in expectations, right? And now he's got an opportunity to work with, a young GM in Jay Hernandez, and probably, revitalize, re-energize a brand that is, or a club that's, could be in the top 2, top 3 in Major League Soccer pretty much consistently. So I think those are my two that stick out to me. But I do want to go back to the club that you were talking about, Gordo, because there's a corollary here in the Portland Timbers, and I think the fans having as much say as they do, because we were talking a little bit off air about Gavin Wilkinson and the move that Sporting KC just went through. So they hire Gavin Wilkinson to be their technical director, and after 8 days, they let him go. So we've seen some of this stuff, right? We've seen Chris Klein ultimately have to step down with the Galaxy. We've seen, the Neville hire in Portland, and they almost unwound that hire in saying, okay, well, how much feedback are we really going to take from these fans? Sporting KC takes it one step further. They make a major hire, and then they say, okay, you know what? It's not going to work for us. 8 days. For me, that was shocking. And I don't know if there's any other way to put it, but I think shocking is probably a pretty good descriptor. Gordo, do you think that Sporting made the right decision?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was just
absolutely
shocked.
Not.
Absolutely not. I was shocked as well. I was shocked. Unless there can always be something underneath the surface, but from what we know, what's on the surface, and if there is something underneath the surface, they should come out and say that.
Well, I think that there was, they went through the Yates report, right? Which was, I think, a result of Wilkinson ultimately getting fired, essentially, and not directly responsible for those things, but was directly responsible for being responsible, if that makes sense, right?
But they still hired him. And so,
but they still hired him, right?
They still hired him. They had all that information. Nothing new came out. And
doesn't seem like there's new information, right?
Right. And so the reason that I think it's not it was awful for them. It just I forget what situation we were talking. It's kind of like the Berhalter rehiring. It's like what was that process like? It just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And it makes you look unorganized, and it makes you look stupid. It makes you look stupid. You admit 8 days or 10 days after the hiring that you're wrong. And so I'll go out and say I love the fans being outspoken. It means they care, and I love it. Okay, I love it to death. It means that our league is growing, and the fans truly care. They feel like they have ownership of the club and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean we have to listen to them as organizations, do what's right for the club. And so I think that puts them in a tough position because they've given them some sort of control because they're willing to step up. And then there's more, protests, and we're not going to come to the game if you do this. And it's like, dude, you got to keep control of the fans. I think that maybe it feels like we're so young as a league still, and we've gotten all these great. We've gotten all these great followings and supporting groups, and we're like so thankful to have them because we didn't have them before. That now the power shift is kind of happening, right? So now they're like, hey, we're stronger than you. If we just threaten that we're going to go because we're the loyals and we're the ones that come every day. And then you try to fill up the rest of the stadium. If we leave, you're screwed. So I feel like it's like,
are they?
No, they're not. But that's what Kansas City just said. Doesn't
and that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. And so for me, I just think it was a bad move. I think it was a real bad move.
Dax, you talked a little bit about the process that Gordo was referencing. The Sporting KC did hire I think Nolan Partners, an outside firm to be kind of the consulting group that presented some options or did maybe the exhaustive research of the process, starts the process, is a hand in the process, et cetera.
Yeah.
Where do you think that their process netted out, and do you think that they made the right decision?
Well, it's hard to know what involvement and what candidates this outside research firm presented to Sporting Kansas City without someone. Did
for sure.
people,
I think the Athletic did say, and I'll misquote this, but I'll just throw it out there anyway.
Yeah.
They did say that Wilkinson was not one of the final candidates that they delivered to the Sporting KC brass to make a decision on.
Correct. So first of all, I completely disagree with Gordo. I think that Sporting Kansas City did make the right decision.
Okay.
They shouldn't have hired him in the first. They shouldn't have hired him in the first place. Okay.
Should not have hired him in the first place.
They should not have hired him in the first place, and I'm going to tell you why.
That wasn't the question. It wasn't the question.
I know. I realize that, but we're not talking about sporting reasons. Okay. We're not talking about. And by sporting, I don't mean the club. I mean on the field. We're not talking about. We're not talking about his actual job managing a roster, going and signing players. Like he was not let go because of that. Okay, so the whole Portland Timbers situation and the whole Portland Thorns situation that both of those clubs went through, and Gavin Wilkinson was reported to be a big part of both of those situations. He was let go because of that, not because of anything to do with his performance on the field. To me, the way that I read the situation without having the full details is that I think the sporting fans and people in general are upset about the situation because he has not taken full accountability of actually what he was a part of, right? And so I think he's come out in his press conference when they hired him and said, listen, there are some things in the Yates report that aren't accurate. They're not fact. It's like, hey, man, tell us the facts, dispute them, and give us your side of the story. And I don't think he's come out and said that, whether that is protecting his own ass or whether that is he signed some sort of NDA. I'm not sure. But the truth is that people, and especially in this day and age, people are extremely hurt by this idea that he perpetuated abuse. And that is exactly what people are angry about, and rightfully so. Now, if there was something that was misreported or not fact, he needs to come out and defend himself, or he needs to take full accountability and say, hey, listen, guys, this is exactly what happened. This is where I messed up, and this is where I will do better, right? Because it sounds to me like everyone deserves a second chance, in my opinion, as long as they hold themselves accountable first and they learn, right? The Sporting Kansas City situation with the fans, I think it got to a point, Gordo, where they had no choice. They had people left and right canceling season tickets. They had people reaching out to their season ticket reps and saying, I'm not a part of this club anymore. And it wasn't like it wasn't like the LA Galaxy situation in Chris Klein, right? Because that was strictly to do with sporting reasons. Things had to do with roster build and stuff that happened on the field, right? And of course, the fans made their voices heard, but the Galaxy were resisting for as long as they could. This is life. These are life issues and morality issues, right? These are moral compass issues. So I don't have any issue with Sporting KC raising their hand and saying, hey, listen, we made a mistake. We listened to our fans. They're not happy with it. We're going to move on. Fair enough. But how did it get here in the first place? Because now you have the research firm saying, well, Gavin Wilkinson wasn't one of the people that we presented to Sporting Kansas City to hire. So now you're asked with, well, whose authority was it that hired Gavin Wilkinson, right? How did this whole process shake out? So there's more questions than answers. Ultimately, I think Sporting did the right thing because at the end of the day, you're only as good as the people who are supporting your product and paying for your product, right? And so if they're not happy and they're going to show their displeasure and we're not just talking about a couple hundred people, Gordo, I think we're talking about like a very big portion of the Sporting fan base made their voice heard, and it was overwhelming what they had to do. They had no choice, right? And
I haven't seen any numbers on that. Have you seen numbers?
I haven't seen numbers, but look, I'm active on social media, right? Yeah. I follow The Athletic. I follow people that report on the game in this country, and right. it was loud and it was overwhelming. And so I think Sporting,
but there's a bunch of boobs on social media.
That's true, but like I said to you, there are people that said I have reached out to my season ticket rep to let my displeasure be known and cancel my season tickets. So it's a minority on social media, Gargs, but my question is how many people not active on social media did the same exact thing? Yeah. Clearly, it was a massive number because Sporting Kansas City decided we can't, this is not something that we can come back from. So
do you think that this was this just a grave miscalculation by Sporting Kansas City that
that's exactly what it was.
That they would not have had this type of backlash?
I think that they thought the backlash would be minimal, and I think they thought they could just weather the storm until the season started. And that's clearly not the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is interesting. I don't have a problem. One sec, Gordo. I don't have a problem with them hiring somebody outside of the list that the Nolan partners or whoever the outside consulting firm is that delivers, information. I think that they're a piece of the process. They're a tool to be used at the group that has the most institutional knowledge disposal, which is the front office of Sporting Kansas City. They know what they know more intimately than anybody else. So I don't have a problem with that. But I do think that there has to be some serious consideration into what that hire looks like well before you ultimately get to the decision where you're winding this.
I agree.
8 days after you're making that decision. That's really, it's just it seems very non-committal from the start. So if this is like a group decision, like a panel of 7 people, it sounds like a 4-3 vote.
there's way more questions about the situation than answers.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all you can say about it. It's just a very weird situation. And ultimately, Sporting Kansas City, they felt like they had no choice. They had to walk back that decision.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I was saying, I think we're in agreement that it was a poor hire
from the start.
Yeah, it was a poor hire from the start.
But what you're trying to say is that you need to you can't let fan voices take over every single thing you do. Yeah,
right. You had to have some conviction to go with Wilkinson. I mean, it had to be.
Yeah. It also seemed like a little bit of like a hidden hire too, because
they tried to bury it, dude. I
only found out that they fired him, not that they hired him.
Yeah. No. They tried to bury it. It was like a late news dump, and they did. I think the press conference was like during like the MLS media marketing tour, so you only had a few people covering the press conference.
I just want to be weary of. Just because fans threaten that we make decisions against our gut, right? Because their gut was like he was going to be a good decision, and I don't want to get too extreme here, but like, what happens when a fan base doesn't want a Muslim coach, of some religion, and they come in and they're like, dude, we don't want this guy, and then we have to hire him because they're going to threaten to pull their tickets. It's that, and that's very extreme, right?
Yeah, but you're talking about a slippery slope of giving control where it shouldn't be.
Right. It's like, if you're going to make a hire, like, keep him, dude. Like, you're going to have to. Part of your
owning that decision, right?
But part of your equation there had to be like, hey, we're going to get some backlash for this, right?
I agree, Gordo. I don't understand, but I don't understand how it got to that point in the first place, right? So
anyway, I think
they made the right decision.
Made the right decision. Interesting. Well, now they have an even bigger decision on their hands. How do you come back to it? What's next? Do you go to number 2? Is that option even available? Do you pause the hire?
Peter, it's like, hey, guess what, Peter? You got both jobs again, buddy. Sorry.
it's like going to a restaurant. You ask the waitress. You ever do this? You ask the waitress, hey, what's good here? And they give you 2 options. You're like, nah, I'll have the steak.
All right, thank you. Hey, what do you like here? Should they give you a bunch of options? You're like, all right, I don't need any of those. I'm just going to get what I was going to get in the first place.
I love doing that.
Yeah, my wife does that literally every single time we go out. And let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors.
Gordo, we live in crazy times right now. What are things looking like in the real estate market?
Oh, Dax, you know that rates are always going to be the best with Synergy One lending, and those are always going to fluctuate. But one thing that never fluctuates, that's the service you get with Erin from Fikes Realty Group. She is the #1 agent I will refer all my clients to. She handles all the obstacles up front, really takes the stress out of any transaction and move that you have. Check out my girl Erin Mishu with Fikes Realty Group at majorleague-realestate.com.
Well, here's another club that's probably heading in the opposite direction, or at least the perception is that they're heading in the opposite direction. Gordo, in your neck of the woods, the Colorado Rapids are maybe making the most significant moves, most significant changes this offseason from, I think, a couple of years of pretty underwhelming performances, results, standing within Denver, within Major League Soccer landscape. They brought in Chris Armas, which is a decision, right, in and of itself. That's a move, and I would say that was met maybe 50-50, maybe not as excited for a fan base that you would think is a possible. And so then they follow that up with Zach Steffen. They re-signed Cole Bassett. They bring in Georgi Mihalovic. They bring just recently announced Sam Vines. Are you buying, Gordo, are you buying the Colorado Rapids?
If I'm picking buy or sell,
I'm trying to simplify these questions for you, dude. I don't want to overload your brain.
I mean, it's more complicated than that, dude. I'm not gonna go and just sell them right off the bat. Okay, historically.
Are we straddling the fence here? Is this what that sounds like, Garg? It sounds a lot like me.
I am. So okay, no. All right, you want an answer? I'm gonna buy the Rapids. Okay, I'm gonna buy the Rapids. Okay, the reason that I'm gonna buy the Rapids is because there's fresh blood. Like, for the hire itself. Okay, I was
Ambivalent?
Yes. There you go. Thank you. So, and there's no disrespect whatsoever to Chris Armas. No disrespect. Right. But I feel like Robin Fraser and Chris Armas, to me, are right at the same level as one another.
Should be able to find the same amount of success.
So I thought it was a lateral move and it was unexciting. And because I have that much respect for Robin, right? And it has nothing to do with Chris Armas. So I thought it was, what is it? Ambivalent. Ambivalent. So yeah, so that didn't excite me. And I was like, okay, we're going to have more of the same, right? And there's your Gordo quote for the day, Jack. Go ahead and clip that one up.
He's already clipping it.
But the moves are making me excited. Okay, they're getting some fresh blood. Okay, Jordy is coming in. A couple of those other guys, Sam Vines needed a left back. Okay, they still have a couple of pieces to fill in. So I'm buying the fresh new culture and attitude that's going to come in, and with that excitement and stuff, I think they'll find some success. I still don't think. This is me getting back on the fence. I still don't think they've made the power moves, okay, like a big number 9, a goal scorer, somebody that's really going to put the ball in the back of the net, maybe solidifying the back a little bit. That is really going to take them to the top of the West. And not to mention, no offense, again, but paying for a goalkeeper in this league has not proven to be the strongest roster.
I thought the same thing when I saw Stefan as the first move that they made. I was like, oh man,
right.
Why?
It's like
that has nothing to do with Stefan either. Like I like Stefan.
It doesn't have anything to do with Tim Howard, but it didn't work because then you don't have enough money to fill the other positions, the needed positions, especially for them, a goal scorer, right? A goal scorer. So for me, it's like, I know I'm straddling the fence. I'm going to buy their fresh new attitude, but they need to do more. They need to make a couple more for them to make.
Well, I mean, here's the other thing. It's still only January 22nd today. And we're still talking about other clubs that are really haven't done much, are still working on reshaping their roster, still talking about deals that are incoming, outgoing. And I don't know what their cap looks like. I don't know where they're sitting, but there's still plenty of time for that to happen.
I'm buying the Rapids 100%. And I'm not.
You are?
I'm buying them 100%. So, and this is why. I'll tell you why. And I'll be much more eloquent than Mr. Gordowski over there. The West, to me, is not even close to what it used to be. You have LAFC. They've lost some really important pieces and still really good, of course. They'll be strong, but again, not what they used to be. Seattle Sounders. Lost some really important pieces. Ladero, how do they move on from him? I'm sure they will bounce back and still be strong. The West, for me, is a crapshoot. Seriously, it's a crapshoot. And Colorado, I think they've brought in people that have stuff to prove. Every single person that they've brought into that club has something to prove, and I think that's valuable, and I think that's very strong. Chris Armas, I have a relationship with Chris, and I know Chris as an assistant coach. I don't know him as a head coach. I know he's going to feel pressure to prove that he is a good coach because it hasn't worked out for him in the last places he's been.
Dax, I like this take, but how many of these clubs? Hold on. Okay, but just answer this within your answer. How many of those Western Conference clubs are unreliable? Like the ones that you're mentioning that are maybe going to take a dip here. How many of them can we not rely on to bounce right back?
Maybe that's the case. I think the West right now is just all over the place. I think it's gonna be near impossible to call the West. I think St. Louis is gonna have a little bit of a regression, and I think LAFC and Seattle, like they're probably still going to be very good. But other than that, I think the West is a total crapshoot. I think it's up in the air to see who is going to do well and who isn't going to do well. So if the bar for the Rapids should be, hey, let's just get back to the playoffs, all right, because of how bad they were.
Right.
Chris Armas, ton to prove. Georgi Mihailovic, excellent for Chicago in his last year. Good enough to go and get bought by an Eredivisie club. And look, there are some reasons not affiliated with the soccer field why Georgie felt like he had to come back. That's not for me to talk about, but tons to prove. Didn't work out for him in Europe. Now he's their highest transfer fee ever. He is entering into the prime of his career. I rate him very highly.
He needs to play to get back in the national team.
He needs to play. I think he's got a ton to prove. I think he's going to be great for them. Sam Vines, it was just reported that he's going to be back. One of the biggest problem positions for almost any MLS team is a very strong left back.
Mhm.
He's been in the national team. He's been in Europe. I think that's a really shrewd move that they have made to sign him. The one question mark I have, and look, Zach Steffen, of course, a little bit of a question mark, but again, a guy who has a ton to prove. The one question mark I have isn't even really up top. I think they have one or two strikers that I think I don't know what the guy's name might be. Navarro. I think he was injured a lot for them last year. Like paid a lot of money for him. We'll see what he can do this year. The one question for me is defensive midfield, a number 6, and I know that that's been a big need for them for a year or two now. And I rate Connor Ronan very highly. Their central midfielder. They just re-signed Cole Bassett. I just like a lot of things that Colorado has done, and because of the uncertainty of the West, I do think that this is going to be a successful year for the Rapids as long as they can go and get that number 6. If they can get a really good young stud number 6, I think it's going to be a big year for them. How's that? You like that take?
No, it's not bad. I don't hate it. So is that, if you're talking about a vision for a club, like, do you think that that's who they are? Are they looking to find chips on shoulders and that's kind of who they want to be?
Yes, but also everyone they've brought in is young. Zach Steffen, I don't know, what is he, 30 now? I mean, he's still pretty young for a goalkeeper.
There's another way to say bringing in guys that with something to prove. It's bringing in guys that haven't been successful where they've gone. Guys
but have had success in MLS. But they have had success in MLS
in the past, right? But they're getting guys.
But they're older. They're older now.
Bargain.
They're entering their primes now.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I know you are, and that's fine. And I know you are, and that's fine. I'm just telling you right now. I read an article from Porig Smith and Chris Armas about how they want to play and how they want to use Colorado and the altitude to their advantage, and they want to high press and they want to make sure teams are struggling when they come there. Like that's what
every single
Pablo said that. Yes, everybody said.
Listen, we have seen with St. Louis and with Red Bull that is a high floor way to play in MLS. And if you can get the other side of the game right, the attacking side of the game right, I think that they have a high potential to have a big turnaround this year. So look, it's not set in stone. I mean, who knows what's going to happen out in the West, but I like what they've done. And I think that, Chris Armas, he needs this, he needs to take this chance and opportunity and run with it. And I think he will.
All right, leave us with this, Dax. What's the inside scoop on what's going on with everyone's favorite people, the referees?
I wish I knew, man.
Because referee stock is at an all-time high. I mean, the highest it's ever been in the history of referees, because it's a profession that seems like, well, one, never gets any love. Everyone hates the referees. They don't make any right decisions. You're always wrong. So it's a very difficult place to be in from a starting point. However, there's also declining numbers in referees across the country. Youth sports, it's a consistent issue that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And now at the highest level, Major League Soccer in our country, they're talking about striking. What do you know? What's going on?
I wish I knew. I mean, we're going to reference The Athletic a lot, I feel like, because The Athletic is breaking every story these days. I'll be curious to see how this plays out, because, we do talk about the refs. I think that their stock has never been higher, Dan, like what you're saying, because of the fact, and I forgot which refereed the MLS Cup, but he was fantastic. He got every decision right in MLS Cup. There was a big profile on him in The Athletic where it kind of went through like his whole game day routine, all the big calls he made. He wasn't a big storyline, which means the ref did a great job. So look, the only thing that I know is that what every CBA negotiation is always about, right? More money, better benefits, better working conditions for the refs. And look, at the end of the day, we can all argue that about MLS refs or refs in any sport, right? They make mistakes. They're human. I do think that if you want to compare the refs of 10 years ago to the refs now, they're significantly better and the level is significantly higher. And that's, for me, very clear. The question for the referees now, and look, as all three of us have been through these CBA negotiations with your employers, right? They're never easy. They're never straightforward. They piss you off unrelentingly, right? It's just you constantly feel like you're negotiating with a wall. I'm curious to see, because it was reported that like the MLS might be, or Pro or whoever is the employers of the referees, might be strongly considering replacement refs to start the MLS season. The refs have to decide how far they want to take it, right? Because look, once those paychecks stop coming in, that's a difficult life. And I think we all know that.
How many replacement refs are out there?
But that's my point. I don't know. So look, I think it's a difficult situation for the refs. Gordo's going to, that would honestly make my life.
Gordo, I would pay any amount of money to see you in the middle of a game on a consistent basis weekly.
Listen,
can we start a GoFundMe to just get Gordo out there?
If we can get it, if we can get a rule, a sanction that I can use a segue around the field, I guarantee you, I changed the game, dude. I changed the game for MLS. Like nobody will ever want another.
And the first time you're looking at a play and you're segueing down the field and just smash into a player and break his leg. That's the end of that. That's the end of that experiment.
That's why. That's why.
Listen, I know we're having a good time. It's a difficult situation, I think, for referees to be in because I don't know any numbers, but I'm sure they're not breaking the bank to begin with. So you never want guys that are working hard, guys and women who are working hard and trying to make this game better in this country. Mm-hmm. You never want them to be in this position, but they've got to fight for what they believe in. And if they believe that they need to have improved working conditions, well, then I wish them the best. And I hope they get at least a little bit of what they're asking for. Now it's just a matter of, from the other side of it, if you go into week one with replacement referees, how many poor performances and bad refereeing performances are you going to allow before you cave?
Dude,
I don't necessarily think they care.
I'll take it one step further. You cannot go into this season with replacement referees, period, end of story. Yep. You can't do it. Because referees, whether we like them or not, they have done a much better job. I mean, the officiating in Major League Soccer is worlds better than it was in the past. Similar probably to the players, worlds better than what we were a decade ago. The second tier of refereeing is not worlds better, and it will diminish the product and the pace that this league is taking leaps and bounds forward. I don't think that the league is in a position or should be in a position or should put themselves in a position to have to deal with that.
So you think that I agree with you, not to cut you off, Gargs, but I do agree with you. The refereeing, although it's still frustrating at times, it has gotten so much better, on a year-to-year basis, 1,000%. So you think what you're saying is you think that the refs have that much leverage? You think they have more leverage than the players have ever had?
No, I don't. I'm not saying that.
I don't think the refs have that much leverage.
What I am saying is that I think it would be a huge mistake by the league to not give the refs something because they have increased. We all know that the league isn't paying them what they're worth because that's what the league does. So they're not there. But I do think that they're at a point now where whatever they're asking, you should just find a way to get them in a position to continue to grow. Because you're right, Armando Villarreal, who was the name that you were looking for, Dax, that did the final.
The little guy.
And he did a great job. There's a number of them that do a really good job. I think if I'm going to pick out one thing that frustrates me the most about officiating at this point, it's VAR. And it's still missing the right call when you have an opportunity to look at it. It is crazy that we still can't get that right. I get less and less frustrated by actual officiating on the field. They miss calls. Sometimes they mismanage games, whatever. It's a very difficult job being a referee. And I think they do a much better job of it now. VAR still boggles my mind how we're getting that wrong. And I think that that's less about the actual referees than it is about what that process looks like and making correct decisions.
I mean, VAR seems like the easiest thing that people should be able to get right, but you're right, Gargs. They've struggled now for a couple years now to figure out VAR. So I think that's the next frontier that they have to improve. And by the way, I still think MLS does a better job than some other leagues that I watch around the world.
Could be fair. I still think the timing of it's still way too long. It's still to get to a resolution, and I think a lot of times you're still not getting to the correct resolution. So I don't know. Gordo, I just think that if they let this drag on and they go into a position where now they have to explain themselves about why they're having replacement referees, it's not a good look for anybody. So what they ultimately do, well, I guess we'll see. It's still a good ways off, but as we all know, it comes quick. Dax is going to fly through this preseason through about
Dude.
9 cups of coffee a day. And
First preseason game for Atlanta United this Saturday against Birmingham Legion. I'm excited.
Ooh, let's go.
Birmingham. St. Louis City just sent one of their young guys down there on loan.
Birmingham, that's England.
Miguel Perez, young cat, started as a homegrown. He's a St. Louis boy. All right, boys. Well, listen, that was decent. Well done out of both of you. Mainly correct answers for the most part. Gordo, just
ambivalous.
listen. Maybe just listen.
Is that his new word he just made up? Ambivalous.
Ambivalent.
Gordo, can we get some lights in that new studio? Is that possible? Or are you
It makes me look tan. It makes me look tan, dude. No, it's my winter tan, bro. Get off me.
All right, Major League Journeyman. We will catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in.